The Indian economy at this moment is in intensive care. What's the best ventilator that can help the Indian economy revive and come out of ICU? We focused a lot on the coronavirus problem and the medical solutions which are being worked on. But what are the economic solutions that can possibly be considered? The government at this moment contemplating Stimulus 2.0. What form should this stimulus take? What does India Inc. need to ensure that not just can we save lives, but also livelihoods? Joining us on this India Inc. virtual brainstorm, I want to welcome our guests for this broadcast, some of the sharpest voices from India Inc. I want to start by introducing Dr. Pavan Goenka. He runs Mahindra & Mahindra. Flanking him is Chandrajit Banerjee, the big man at CII, Director General of the Confederation of Indian Industry. Also with us is Ajay Singh, who runs SpiceJet. So we've got a cross-section of industry represented. What I want to do is show you how different research agencies and banks are revising the estimates for the speed at which the economy is going to grow. This is being considered the biggest depression in the economy since the Second World War. So let me take you through some of what the data is showing at this moment, and then we can try and get a sense from our guests of what they believe needs to be done to try and revive the economy. If you go through data that's come from Goldman Sachs, Fitch, Standard & Poor's, CRISIL, Moody's, everyone is suggesting that the economy is in for a really rough time. Here is Goldman Sachs' estimate. The earlier estimate was that the economy, which in any case was slowing down and growing at only 3.3%, that rate could fall to 1.6% in the current year. After this, let's look at what Fitch is saying. Fitch Rating says that the earlier forecast was 5.1%. Now they're revising their forecast down to 2%. Here is Standard & Poor's, which earlier estimated that the economy would grow at 5.2%. They brought that down to 3.5%. This is India Ratings and Research from 5.5% to 3.6%. So you get the drift. Virtually every research agency and bank is projecting that the economy will fall very dramatically. Now the problem is a lot of these estimates are based on variables which haven't fully been calculated, because you don't know how long the lockdown will last. At this moment, you don't know how quick the recovery will be, what the conditions for the recovery are. So we really are in a black swan moment with lots of uncharted waters being dived into. So let me start by asking Dr. Pavan Goenka at Mahindra & Mahindra his initial thoughts. The automobile sector is one of the most important wheels of the Indian economy. Now we're talking about lockdown 2.0. So I want to start with the short term, then the medium, and then the long term. In the short term, the government is saying this time the focus is on Jaan plus Jahan. So lives and livelihoods also will matter to some extent. What do you think would be the best formulation to try and ensure we can save lives and yet start protecting livelihood? Dr. Goenka.
Thank you, Rahul. Clearly, you're not working from home. I see you're tired in the studio. So I'm glad some of us are not confined to our houses. See, as you have indicated, that right now any projection that anybody is making on how the GDP will behave this year is a pure guess, because we don't know how far the lockdown will last, and more than that, once we open up, it's not like everything will be back to normal. Many industries will take a long time to come back to normal. For example, aviation industry, tourism industry, hospitality, auto industry, for that matter, I think will take a long time before it comes to normal, because buying cars or traveling will not be on the top of the list of people once the life comes back to normal. Now, auto industry obviously is a very big provider of economic activity in terms of GDP, in terms of GST collection, in terms of employment, which is the most important one, and in terms of how much forward and backward linkage there is. So the biggest concern that anyone has to have right now when it comes to auto industry would be how the employment will be affected, and how the wages of especially low wage earners, the daily workers, the migrant workers, the contract workers will be affected. Auto industry employs, depending on which numbers you believe, more than 100 lakh people, and directly between dealers, between suppliers, between OEMs. While for some time they may get paid, but if it continues much beyond the current lockdown that is announced, I think it's going to be a problem not in terms of getting wages paid, but also in terms of employment continuing. And to me, if government has to step in, that has to be the number one priority.
Chandrajit Banerjee, CII in fact has compiled a whole set of suggestions on what should be done in the immediate moment. What do you think should be the form that lockdown 2.0 takes, so that we don't end up spreading the contagion and yet we can get at least some factories back on track? Which are the factories that you think can be turned back on?
So, the way we have been looking at is that, yes, there is, and we like this statement of, both lives and livelihoods are both important. So keeping that in mind, what we have looked at is sort of a radiating heat map between the red zone, the amber zone, and the green zones. And we think that this is the way we could map the industries and see how we could really look at some of the employment generating sectors could be put in, which are coinciding with the green zones, which can be started off. Clusters such as the textiles clusters, and areas which fall out of the red zones, which should be started. So a lot of it, like the electronic industry, especially those which are the export-oriented industry, especially those which are the MSMEs, which are export-oriented and links up to the supply chain. Those are the ones, the auto component industry. So, for instance, the auto industry provides a huge part of the economy, and there is a lot of export potential over there. So that's the way we have selected industries which could really be seen to be the first layer which could be moved out in terms of the lockdown, which can move out of the lockdown and start. Keeping in mind that the red zones have to be a no-go at this point in time. Coinciding with this, phasing out of the lockdown, we also would need to see a very strong economic package coming our way, which would help industries to really sustain itself, and that's going to be critical. And as we know all, that the situation is extraordinary, and we really require extraordinary approach to see how industries can cope up.
Okay,
with
so
this
now the one
challenge.
sector that's most impacted and where every single person, including me, would have deep concerns before boarding the next flight is the aviation sector, because a lot of the virus spread because of travelers coming from one place to another. And now if there's somebody sitting next to me when I'm flying next, whenever that happens and I don't know, Ajay Singh, whether it's on SpiceJet or any other airline globally, the traveler is likely to be deeply concerned. How do you see the aviation sector emerge from this? Let's just start with the immediate moment.
Well, at this time, of course, the priority is to make sure that we rid ourselves of this virus. And therefore, we support the lockdown that this government has imposed on the country. I think we've got a lot of appreciation for how India has dealt with the COVID crisis. Yeah, so I think that India's got a lot of appreciation for the way that the country's dealt with this COVID crisis, and we are very happy about that. As far as aviation is concerned, this is the most impacted sector in the world at this time. And you've seen what other countries are doing to try and help airlines in their countries. From the US, which has given a $50 billion stimulus to the aviation space, 25 billion in grants, 25 billion in loans. Germany, Singapore, the Middle East, all these countries are trying to ensure that the airlines, which are such an integral part of their economies, are not just going to disappear. So it's going to be it's tough, and we are hoping that the government can support us. But having said that, there's also an opportunity, we believe, in this sector to try and fix the structural problems that we've always had, that we've had for years. People keep saying that India only reforms in a crisis, and if this is a crisis for the aviation industry, this is a super crisis. And in this super crisis, we need to fix the structural problems that we've always had.
But the structural problems in just a moment. I also want to ask Sanjeev Puri at ITC, what according to him, can be done during lockdown 2.0 to ensure that to some extent at least we can start getting the economy back on track? Mr. Puri.
Okay, I think first of all, there is no doubt that it's a very challenging situation, and as the Prime Minister has rightly said, it's a question of the right balance between lives and livelihoods. And
could I request you to look into the eye of the camera? So just on the phone that you have, there'll be the lens of the camera. Perfect, much better. Go ahead, please.
Yeah,
much better, sir.
So it's about the right balance between lives and livelihoods, because whatever we do on reviving the economy can actually, we can lose steam if we are not able to contain the fight against COVID-19. So I think a calibrated opening as a first step, I would say that getting the manufacturing and agri-value chains operating in a scenario with new ways of working that takes care of safety norms and reduce risks at workplaces. That will be most critical, getting the logistics back in place, getting the labor back to the factories. I think this is the first step in reviving. And then as we go along, I think they will be, it's a long haul, it's a long battle. There will be places where certain concerns with respect to COVID-19 will emerge. So how well can we sharply target them, micro-target, and take some localized actions so that...
Here is my larger concern. As I hear these four initial voices, what's very clear is that industry is expecting a stimulus, industry is expecting, like has been the case in countries elsewhere, government to step in. But the problem, Mr. Banerjee, is that if every sector and every CEO starts expecting some kind of fiscal help from the government simply doesn't have that kind of money in India or elsewhere. And most importantly, in India, whatever money there is, a large part of that really needs to go to the poorest of the poor, those who need the money the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we have been recommending, if you have seen, is a twofold strategy for the government. A part through the fiscal expansion, which is directed towards the bottom of the pyramid, which is extremely important. Much of it has been done earlier. And also enhanced credit to industry through banks. And that's going to be critical. So basically looking at, say, for instance, for enterprises, we have calculated that credit offtake, that needs to increase by 14 to 15% in the year. And the targeted intervention of money that needs to reach all the enterprises. So we should consider this as a loss period, and all banks should really slot in extension of working capital to all companies, which is going to be very critical. Small, medium, large, all. And this can be considered at a rate of, say, 3 months on the wage bill. Say, for instance, that's something that we are talking about. And the interest rate should be set around 4% or so. And the loan should be guaranteed by the government in case business losses due to the COVID. So the RBI can provide a refinance guarantee as well. So there are different ways. So it cannot be, see, this is an extraordinary time. We should not finish all our resources at one go. It has to be graded. We need the intervention of the government today. We will require it again 3 months down the line.